Hello everyone, welcome back. This is a story from Her Silent Revenge, and it has taken a turn you absolutely didn't expect. Let's begin.
My parents abandoned me when I was 7 years old. They dumped me at my grandmother's house like garbage cluttering their feet. After she passed away, leaving me hundreds of millions of dollars, guess who came back? That's right, them. The ones who threw me away, they tried to sue me to take that money. But the moment I walked into the courtroom, the judge froze, stammering, "Wait, you're... Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. Comment and tell me, where are you watching from and what brought you here today? I want to hear your voice, too." Just so you know, while parts of this story are fictionalized for entertainment value, and any similarity to actual people or locations is purely coincidental, the core truth about healing and justice remains real. The Austin County Courthouse smelled like old wood and broken promises. I pressed my palm against the brass handle of Courtroom 4C, steadying myself before pushing through the heavy oak doors. Spring sunlight slanted through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the gallery benches. My heels clicked against the polished floor, a sound too loud in the hushed space, and I felt every eye turn toward me. Then I saw them. William and Margot Monroe sat at the plaintiff's table, back straight, dressed like they were attending a country club luncheon rather than attempting to rob their own daughter. My father, William, wore a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His hair had gone silver at the temples, distinguished people might say. I'd call it fitting for a man who'd aged 20 years without bothering to know his child. Margot's blonde highlights caught the light as she leaned toward her attorney, whispering something that made him nod. She looked younger than 49. Money did that bought you good dermatologists, personal trainers, the luxury of sleeping soundly while your daughter grew up without you. She glanced up. Our eyes met. I waited for something guilt recognition, even basic human decency. Instead, Margot's lips curved into a smile. Not warm, calculated. The kind of smile you'd give a business competitor right before you crushed them. 20 years. That's how long it had been since I'd seen them in person. 2 decades of silence, and the first thing my mother offered me was a courtroom smile. Natalie. Alexander Reed's voice pulled me back. My attorney stood beside me, his hand gently guiding me toward the defense table. At 50-something, Alexander had the kind of face that had seen too many courtroom battles and won most of them. His gray eyes were steady, reassuring. "Breathe," he murmured, pulling out my chair. "You belong here, they don't." I sat folding my hands on the table to keep them from shaking. The cold wood pressed against my palms. Real, solid. Not like the knot of emotions threatening to choke me. The bailiff's voice cut through the room. All rise. The Honorable Judge Leonard Garrett presiding. Chairs scraped. Fabric rustled. I stood with everyone else watching as Judge Garrett entered from his chambers, a tall man in his late 50s with sharp features and silver hair cropped military short. He moved with the kind of authority that came from decades on the bench, his black robe swishing as he climbed to his seat. "Be seated." We sat. Judge Garrett adjusted his glasses, scanning the papers before him. Case number CV 2024-08847, Monroe v. Monroe. The matter of the estate of Rosalind Ann Monroe, deceased. His voice carried through the courtroom, measured and professional. This court will hear arguments regarding allegations of undue influence in the execution of Mrs. Monroe's last will and testament. My grandmother's name hung in the air. Rosalind Ann Monroe. The woman who'd raised me, who'd taught me to stand up straight, speak clearly, and never let anyone make me feel small. The woman who died 3 months ago and left me everything because I was the only family she'd ever been able to count on. And now they wanted to take it all away. "Ms. Monroe," Judge Garrett said, his gaze finding me across the room. "Please state your full name for the record." "Natalie Elizabeth Monroe, Your Honor." My voice came out stronger than I felt. But as I spoke my name, my grandmother's name, something shifted inside me. I wasn't here anymore. Summer 2004. I was 7 years old. The afternoon sun beat down on the driveway, making the asphalt shimmer like water. I clutched Mr. Buttons, my stuffed bear, against my chest, his worn fur damp from where I'd been crying into him all morning. "Daddy, I don't want to go." William crouched down, his hands on my shoulders. He smelled like cologne and coffee. "It's just for a little while, sweetheart. Mommy and Daddy have some things we need to figure out. Your grandmother is going to take such good care of you. But I want to stay with you." I didn't understand. Children never do. One day, I had a home, a family, a pink bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. The next, I had a suitcase and a teddy bear and parents who couldn't look me in the eye. Margot stood by the car, her arms crossed, tapping one manicured nail against her elbow. She wore sunglasses that hid her eyes. She was always hiding something, but her mouth was pressed into a thin line, impatient, ready to leave. "William," she said, "not honey, not darling, just his name, flat and cold." My father's hands dropped from my shoulders. He stood already turning away. "Wait," I grabbed his hand. "When are you coming back?" "Soon, Natalie, we'll come back soon." It was the first lie, but not the last. Margot didn't crouch down. She didn't even remove her sunglasses. She just leaned forward barely and pressed her lips to my forehead. The kiss felt like ice. "Be good," she said. Then they were in the car. The engine started a low purr that sounded like goodbye. I stood in the driveway watching them, waiting for someone to realize they'd made a terrible mistake. The car began to roll forward. "Mommy, Daddy." I ran. My little legs pumped as fast as they could, my sandals slapping against the hot asphalt. Mr. Buttons fell from my arms, tumbling into the grass, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. "Don't go, please don't go." The car didn't slow down. I chased it to the end of the driveway, my lungs burning, my vision blurring with tears. The red taillights grew smaller and smaller until they disappeared around the corner. They were gone. My legs gave out. I collapsed right there on the scorching pavement, the heat seeping through my flowered dress, burning my knees. I screamed a raw, broken sound that no 7-year-old should ever have to make. They'd left me. My parents had driven away without looking back. "Natalie." A shadow fell over me. I looked up through tears and saw her Rosalind Monroe, my grandmother. At 52, she was still beautiful in that timeless way. Some women, or her dark hair pulled back her face, kind but lined with a life spent fighting battles. She wore slacks and a cream blouse, having just come home from the Texas Supreme Court, where she served as a justice. She knelt beside me on that burning driveway, not caring about her clothes, and wiped the tears from my cheeks with gentle thumbs. "They're gone," I sobbed. "They left me." "I know, sweetheart, I know." "Are they coming back?" Rosalind looked at me for a long moment. Even then, she never lied to me. "I don't think so, baby. Not the way you want them to." The words should have destroyed me. Instead, she gathered me into her arms, lifted me all scrapes and tears and confusion, and carried me toward the house. "But I'm here," she whispered against my hair, "and I'm not going anywhere. Do you understand me, Natalie? I will never leave you." That night, I lay in her guest bedroom, my bedroom now staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. Rosalind sat on the edge of the bed, her hand stroking my hair like my mother used to do, back when I still believed mothers stayed. "Will they come back for me?" I asked again, because 7-year-olds don't give up hope easily. Rosalind was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "There are some doors, Natalie, that once they close, it's better to leave them shut. Do you understand?" I didn't, not then. But I do now. Ms. Monroe. Judge Garrett's voice sliced through the memory, yanking me back to the present. I blinked, suddenly aware of where I was. Not a child's bedroom in 2004, but a courtroom in 2024. 20 years had passed. That little girl in the flowered dress had grown into a woman with a law degree and a backbone made of steel, courtesy of the grandmother who'd kept her promise. I was 27 now, a lawyer myself, and I was sitting across from the two people who'd abandoned me, watching them try to take away everything my grandmother had left me, 280 million she'd built through decades of brilliance and hard work. To the only family I could count on, her will had read. To my granddaughter, Natalie. She stayed when no one else did. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, meeting Judge Garrett's eyes. He studied me for a moment, then glanced at the papers before him. The courtroom waited in that peculiar silence that only exists in places where lives are decided. Judge Garrett set down his pen. When he looked up again, his expression had shifted, something softer beneath the judicial gravity. "Before we begin," he said slowly, his voice deliberate, measured, "I must disclose something." My pulse quickened. His eyes found mine across the courtroom and held them. Justice Rosalind Monroe was a colleague of mine. More than that, she was a mentor. I will recuse myself from this case if either party objects. The air left my lungs. He knew her. Judge Leonard Garrett had known my grandmother. Let me tell you what happened after they left me behind. The phone calls started 3 weeks later. I remember the first one, a Tuesday afternoon in late August. I was sitting at Grandma Rosalind's kitchen table coloring a picture of a house with 4 stick figures holding hands. When the phone rang, I dropped my crayon and ran. "Mommy." "Hi, sweetheart." Margot's voice sounded distant, like she was calling from another planet. "How are you? When are you coming to get me?" A pause. Too long. "Soon, baby. We just need a little more time. Are you being good for Grandma?" I glanced at Rosalind, who stood near the stove. She gave me a small, sad smile. "Yes," I whispered. "That's my girl. I have to go now. Love you." The line went dead before I could say it back. Those first months, the calls came twice a month. William would ask about school. Margot would remind me to brush my teeth. They never stayed on longer than 5 minutes. Always busy. Always somewhere else. Always almost ready to come back. When I'd ask every time. Soon, they'd promise. Soon became a word I learned to hate. My 8th birthday fell on a Saturday in April. I woke up early dressed in my favorite purple shirt and waited by the phone. Grandma Rosalind made pancakes shaped like stars and sang "Happy Birthday" in her slightly off-key voice. We ate breakfast together, and I kept glancing at the phone on the wall. It didn't ring. By evening, I'd given up. I went to bed early, crying into my pillow until sleep pulled me under. 3 days later, a card arrived. Generic, store-bought. "Happy 8th birthday, love Mom and Dad." No phone call, no explanation, just a card that arrived too late to matter. Grandma Rosalind found me staring at it that afternoon. "They forgot," I said quietly. She sat beside me, her arm warm around my shoulders. "I know, sweetheart. Why don't they want me?" "Oh, Natalie." She pulled me close. "This isn't about you. It's about them, about choices they made that have nothing to do with how wonderful you are." I wanted to believe her, but I was 8, and 8-year-olds think everything is their fault. The calls became less frequent. Once a month, then every other month, then only on holidays, brief, awkward, filled with forced cheerfulness that fooled no one. When I turned 10, the phone rang one last time. "Hey, kiddo." William's voice sounded tired, guilty. "Happy birthday." "Thanks." "How's school?" "Fine." That's good. Listen, things have been complicated here. Your mom and I were figuring things out. I didn't ask when they were coming back. I'd learned by then that some questions don't have answers worth hearing. "Okay," I said. "I'll call again soon, I promise." He didn't. That was the last time I heard his voice for 14 years. But Grandma Rosalind filled the silence they left behind. On my 8th birthday, 3 days after that awful card arrived, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter written in her elegant cursive on cream-colored stationery. "My dearest Natalie, today you turn 8, and I want you to know something important. Their absence is not your fault. You are smart, kind, brave, and more than enough exactly as you are. Never let anyone, not even your parents, make you believe otherwise. Love always, Grandma." "I'm going to write you one every year," she said, watching me read. "So you'll always know what I see when I look at you." I folded the letter carefully and held it against my chest. Every year, every single one. It became our tradition. Every birthday, no matter what, Grandma Rosalind gave me a letter, handwritten, personal, filled with wisdom I wouldn't fully understand until years later. She taught me other things too. Every morning we'd sit together at the breakfast table, her with black coffee, me with orange juice, and read the newspaper. She'd explain court cases, legal principles, the difference between justice and vengeance. By the time I was 9, I could articulate arguments about constitutional rights. The truth is always hiding beneath the surface. "Natalie," she told me one morning, tapping an article about a corporate fraud case. "A good lawyer knows how to dig until they find it." I absorbed everything. Her office became my favorite room, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, filled with legal texts, her Supreme Court Justice plaque on the wall. I'd curl up in the leather chair by the window and read, trying to understand words like precedent and jurisprudence. Grandma Rosalind never talked down to me. She treated my questions with respect, my opinions with consideration. She made me feel like I mattered, not like my parents who'd made me feel disposable. By the time I turned 12, I'd stopped waiting for them to come back. It was a warm spring evening. I sat cross-legged on the living room floor reading about landmark Supreme Court cases, while Grandma Rosalind worked on her laptop nearby. "Grandma," I asked without looking up. Why did they leave?" She closed her laptop, giving me her full attention. "Come here, sweetheart." I moved to sit beside her on the couch. She took my hand. "Some people," she said carefully, "aren't capable of putting others before themselves. It's not because those others aren't worthy, it's because those people are fundamentally selfish. Your parents wanted things more than they wanted the responsibility of raising you. That's their failure, Natalie, not yours. Do you think they ever loved me? I think they loved the idea of you. But love isn't just a feeling, it's action. It's showing up. It's staying. They didn't do that." I nodded slowly. "I don't need them anymore." "No," she agreed. "You don't. I have you." Her eyes softened. "Yes, you have me, and I'm not going anywhere." That night, she gave me my 5th birthday letter. I read it alone in my room. "You are 12 now, nearly a young woman. I see your strength growing every day. You've survived something that would have broken many people, and you've done it with grace. Remember, the people who matter don't leave, and the people who leave don't matter." I tucked the letter into the wooden box where I kept all the others 4 so far, with 16 more to come. A few weeks later, during breakfast, I asked the question that had been haunting me. "Grandma," I set down my fork, "if they came back, if they wanted to see me, would you let them?" Rosalind studied me for a long moment. Then she set down her coffee cup gently. "That would be your choice, Natalie, not mine. But I promise you this, I would never let them hurt you again. I'd protect you from that." I nodded, feeling something settle inside me, a kind of peace. "I don't think I want to see them," I admitted. "Is that bad?" "No, sweetheart, that's self-preservation. That's wisdom." I picked up my fork again. "Good, because I don't need them anymore. I have you." Grandma Rosalind reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "And I have you. That's more than enough." She was right. It was more than enough. The year I turned 15, my grandmother made a decision that sent shockwaves through the Texas legal community. I was sitting in the gallery of the Texas Supreme Court, a place I'd been dozens of times before watching Rosalind Monroe deliver what would become one of the most talked about retirement speeches in state history. She stood at the podium in her black robes, silver hair pinned back, 70 pairs of eyes fixed on her. 30 years she'd served. 30 years of landmark decisions, legal brilliance, a reputation that made younger lawyers tremble, and seasoned ones respect her without question. Family. She said, her voice steady and clear, "has always been my first priority. It always will be." The room went silent. Judges didn't retire at 63. Not when they were at the peak of their influence. Not when they had at least another decade left on the bench. But Grandma Rosalind had never cared much about what people expected. A reporter caught her afterward in the courthouse lobby. "Justice Monroe, can you explain your decision?" Many are surprised by the timing. Rosalind's eyes found mine across the crowd. I stood near the marble columns, clutching my backpack, still in my school uniform. She smiled, not the polite smile she gave reporters, but the real one she saved for me. "There are legacies," she said, still looking at me, "that matter more than others." That night over dinner, I asked her why. "Because," she said simply, "I've spent 30 years serving justice for strangers. It's time I spent serving the one person who never asked me for anything." "I never asked you to retire." "No, but you deserve a grandmother who's fully present, not one who's always halfway out the door to another case, another hearing, another obligation." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Besides, I have plans." "What kind of plans?" Her smile turned mischievous. "You'll see." 6 months later, Monroe Legal Consulting opened its doors. It wasn't a traditional law firm. Grandma Rosalind didn't take clients to court anymore. Instead, she offered something more valuable, her expertise. Corporations, legal teams, even government agencies paid premium rates for her strategic counsel. She consulted on complex cases, taught appellate strategy, mentored young lawyers who were brilliant but needed someone to show them how to think 3 moves ahead. And she taught me. At 15, I started filing documents, organizing case research, sitting in on client meetings. By 16, I was taking notes during consultations, watching how Grandma Rosalind dissected arguments, identified weaknesses, built strategies that others missed. One day, she told me on a late evening when we were the only ones left in the office, "This will be yours. I'm building it for us." I looked around the modest suite, 3 offices, a small conference room, a receptionist's desk. It didn't look like much yet. "I know what you're thinking," she said, reading my expression like she always could. "But empires don't start big, Natalie. They start with vision." I understood then what she was doing, not just building a business, building my future, our future. When I got into UT Austin Law School in 2015, Grandma Rosalind threw a small celebration dinner. Just the 2 of us, champagne for her and sparkling cider for me, and a toast to new beginnings. Law school was brutal. Everyone said so, and they weren't wrong. But I'd been trained by one of the sharpest legal minds in Texas. While my classmates struggled with case analysis, I was already 3 steps ahead thanks to years of breakfast table discussions about precedent and jurisprudence. I graduated top of my class every semester. Summers, I interned at Monroe Legal, taking on more responsibility each year. Grandma Rosalind started introducing me to clients not as her granddaughter, but as her associate. Those were good years, hard but good. Late nights studying Grandma Rosalind would appear with hot cocoa and a blanket, sitting with me while I worked through complex constitutional problems. She never gave me the answers, just asked the right questions until I found them myself. Teaching you to think, she'd say, is worth more than teaching you to memorize. When I graduated in 2019, Rosalind sat in the front row of the auditorium, beaming with pride. Afterward, she handed me an envelope, my 18th birthday letter, though my birthday wasn't for another month. "My dearest Natalie, you have become the woman I always believed you would be: strong, brilliant, compassionate, and resilient. Watching you walk across that stage today, I felt a pride beyond words. You've earned everything you've accomplished, and this is only the beginning. Love always, Grandma." I cried reading it, happy tears for once. I joined Monroe Legal officially that fall as a junior attorney. Grandma Rosalind and I became partners in every sense. We worked side by side, growing the business from a consultancy into something larger, a full-service legal advisory firm with corporate clients across the South. We won cases, big ones, the kind that made headlines and attracted more clients. By 2022, Monroe Legal Consulting was valued at $280 million. It wasn't just the business that grew, it was us. We weren't just grandmother and granddaughter anymore. We were colleagues, partners, a team that understood each other so well we could finish each other's arguments in client meetings. Forbes ran a profile on us, the power duo reshaping legal consulting, Rosalind and Natalie Monroe. We framed it and hung it in the conference room. Friday nights became sacred. No matter how busy the week, we'd have dinner together, sometimes at her house, sometimes at a restaurant downtown, and we'd talk. Not about work, but about life. Books, music, politics, dreams. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked her one evening. "Retiring from the Supreme Court?" "Not once," she said without hesitation. "I traded one legacy for a better one." "Yell me. You, us, this." She gestured between us. "Some people spend their whole lives building monuments. I got to build a family instead." The signs were subtle at first. In early 2022, I noticed Grandma Rosalind got tired more easily. She'd take longer lunch breaks, something she'd never done before. Her handwriting, always elegant and precise, started to tremble slightly when she signed documents. "You okay?" I asked one afternoon, watching her massage her wrist. "Just getting old, sweetheart," she said with a dismissive wave. "Happens to the best of us." I laughed it off. She was 72, sure, but she'd always been unstoppable, a force of nature. The idea of her slowing down felt impossible. I should have paid closer attention. I should have asked more questions, but I didn't. I told myself she was fine, that she'd always be fine, because the alternative, the possibility of losing her, was something I couldn't let myself think about. So I pushed the worry aside and kept working, kept building. kept pretending I didn't notice the way she winced sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking, or the way her laugh didn't sound quite as bright as it used to. 3 months later, on a Tuesday morning in late spring, my phone rang. Dr. Emily Bradford. I stared at the screen, my stomach dropping. Grandma Rosalind had gone in for routine tests the week before, just a checkup, she'd said. Nothing to worry about. I answered. Natalie, Dr. Bradford's voice was gentle, but serious. You need to come to the hospital right away. We have your grandmother's test results. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. What's wrong? We'll discuss everything when you get here, but Natalie, come now. Stage 4 liver cancer. 4 words and my entire world collapsed. Dr. Emily Bradford sat across from us in her office, hands folded on the desk, expression carefully composed. In that way, doctors learn when delivering unbearable news. The disease is aggressive, she continued gently. With treatment, we can extend quality of life possibly 12 to 18 months. But Rosalind, I need you to understand this isn't curable. 12 to 18 months. A year. Maybe a year and a half if we were lucky. I couldn't breathe. My grandmother, the strongest, sharpest, most indestructible person I'd ever known, was dying. What are the treatment options? Rosalind's voice cut through my panic, steady and clinical, like she was discussing a legal case instead of her own mortality. I heard maybe half of Dr. Bradford's response. The rest drowned beneath the roaring in my ears, the hammering of my heart, the realization that I was about to lose the only person who'd ever stayed. Afterward, I locked myself in the hospital bathroom and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. When I finally emerged, Rosalind was waiting in the hallway, still calm, still composed. We drove home in silence. At the house, she gestured to the couch. I sat numb while she settled into her usual armchair. Natalie. Her voice was firm. I need to say this, and you need to listen carefully. I nodded, wiping at my eyes. Your parents will come back. I blinked. What? William and Margot. They'll return, not because they care about you, but because they'll want the money. They haven't contacted me in 15 years. They will... Rosalind interrupted, her tone absolute. The moment I'm gone, they'll claim I manipulated you, that you took advantage of an elderly woman, that you don't deserve what I've built. They'll try to take everything. The certainty in her voice made my stomach turn. How do you know? Because I know them. I know what kind of people abandon their child and never look back. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. I've spent 20 years protecting you, Natalie. Now I need to prepare you to fight. What followed was the most methodical, strategic campaign I'd ever witnessed. She called Alexander Reed the next day. He came that evening, briefcase in hand, expression grave, when Rosalind explained the situation. We need to make this ironclad, she said. No room for challenge. Understood, Alexander replied. I'll draft everything personally. Over the following weeks, we worked. Grandma Rosalind scheduled appointments, organized files, prepared documentation with military precision. In August 2022, we went to Alexander's law office for the video recording of her will. The conference room was set up like a deposition camera on tripod, professional lighting, court reporter present. Rosalind sat at the table, dressed in a cream blouse and navy blazer posture, straight, mind sharp. My name is Rosalind Ann Monroe. She began, looking directly into the camera. I am 71 years old. I am of sound mind and body, and I am making this statement of my own free will without coercion or undue influence of any kind. She detailed her estate, the business, the properties, the investments, totaling $280 million, and she named me as her sole heir. My granddaughter, Natalie Elizabeth Monroe, has been my family for 20 years. She stayed when others left. She worked beside me to build what we have today. She earned every bit of what I'm leaving her, not through manipulation, but through loyalty, love, and genuine partnership. Her voice sharpened. To those who might contest this will know that I have prepared extensively. The truth will prevail. It always does. When the recording finished, she squeezed my hand. One more thing, she said. The following week, we went to the bank. Rosalind led me into the vault. The bank officer unlocked her safe deposit box, leaving us alone. Inside were envelopes, folders, USB drives. These, how she said, laying them out, are your armor. 20 envelopes each, labeled with a year: 2005, 2006, 2007, all the way to 2024. My birthday letters, all 20 of them. Every year I wrote to you, she said softly. Every year I documented my love, my intentions, my state of mind. No one can claim I was incompetent when there's a 20-year paper trail proving otherwise. Next came a USB drive. The video will, multiple backups. Then file folders, medical records proving her mental competency, financial documents, showing my contributions to Monroe legal performance reviews, client testimonials. Finally, at the bottom, a sealed manila envelope. Aged, worn edges. "What's that?" I asked. Rosalind's expression darkened. "Legal documents from 1998. Open this only if they try to claim parental rights or challenge the will on the basis of family obligation. What's in it? Proof," she said simply. "Proof that they forfeited their rights to you a long time ago." She didn't elaborate, I didn't push. She placed everything back, locked the box, and pressed a duplicate key into my palm. "When they sue you and they will you come here, you open this box. You use everything inside to fight back." Her hand trembled slightly. "Do you understand?" "Yes," I whispered. "We have a year to build your armor," she said. "Maybe more if I'm stubborn enough, but Natalie promised me you won't let them win." "I promise." The next year was both the hardest and most precious of my life. Grandma Rosalind started chemotherapy in September 2022. The treatments were brutal, but she endured them with grim determination. We kept working when she felt strong enough. Some days, a full morning at the office. Other days, just an hour reviewing contracts from the couch. I memorized everything. The way she held her coffee cup, the way she laughed, the sound of her voice saying my name. In February 2024, she stopped treatment. "No more," she told Dr. Bradford. "I want whatever time I have left to be mine." She came home. Hospice nurses visited daily. I took leave and stayed by her side. On a quiet evening in early March, propped up in bed, she handed me one final envelope. "Your 20th letter," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Read it after. After, you'll know when." I held the envelope against my chest, tears streaming. "I won't be there to protect you in person," she said, her hand trembling as she reached for mine. "But I'll be in every letter, every document, every piece of evidence. You're not alone, Natalie. You'll never be alone." 6 days later, on a still morning in March, she took her final breath. I was holding her hand when she went, just like she'd held mine 20 years ago when my parents drove away. This time, though, I was the one who stayed. She died on a Tuesday morning just as the sun rose over Austin. She'd always loved the dawn. The hospice room was quiet except for the steady beep of the monitor beside her bed. Soft light filtered through the curtains, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Grandma Rosalind lay propped against pillows, her breathing shallow, her hand warm in mine. She was still here, still with me, but I could feel her slipping away like sand through my fingers. "Natalie," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I leaned closer, squeezing her hand. "I'm here, Grandma. I'm right here." Her eyes still sharp despite everything found mine. "Don't let them take your peace." "I won't, I promise." "You're the daughter I never had." Her breath hitched. "So proud." "I love you," I choked out. "I love you so much." She smiled, just slightly, just enough. Then the monitor flatlined. The single continuous tone split the silence like a scream, and she was gone. For the first time in 20 years, I was truly alone. The next 3 days passed in a fog. I moved like a machine, signing papers, making phone calls, arranging the funeral. Alexander Reed handled the legal details with quiet efficiency, his presence a steady anchor when everything else felt like it was crumbling. The estate was silent, unbearably silent. I wandered through rooms that still smelled like her lavender perfume, past bookshelves she'd arranged, the coffee cup she'd used that last morning, still sitting on the kitchen counter. I couldn't bring myself to wash it. On the second night, I finally opened the 20th letter. My hands shook as I broke the seal. The envelope was thicker than the others, multiple pages in her elegant handwriting. "My dearest Natalie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't cry too long, sweetheart. They're coming. William and Margot will return not out of love, but out of greed. They'll claim rights they forfeited decades ago. They'll lie, manipulate, and twist the truth to take what you've earned. Stand firm. The truth is your shield. You deserve everything I've left you because you were here when they weren't. You stayed. You loved me not for what I had, but for who I was. Remember the safe deposit box. Use everything inside. Fight for what's yours. I love you more than words can ever express. You made my life complete. Grandma. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face, her words searing themselves into my memory. They're coming. She'd known. Of course she'd known. The funeral was held 3 days later on a beautiful spring afternoon, the kind of day Grandma Rosalind would have spent in the garden with a book and a glass of iced tea. Over 200 people filled the chapel at the funeral home. Texas Supreme Court justices, federal judges, lawyers who'd learned from her, colleagues who'd respected her, clients who'd trusted her. I stood beside the casket in a simple black dress, numb, shaking hands, and accepting condolences I barely heard. She was a legend, an inspiration. We're so sorry for your loss. The eulogies painted a picture of brilliance, integrity, decades of service. They talked about landmark cases, legal precedents, a mind that had shaped Texas law. They didn't talk about the grandmother who made star-shaped pancakes, who sat with me during late-night study sessions, who'd chosen me over a Supreme Court seat. That Rosalind belonged to me alone. I sat in the front row staring at the closed casket, feeling hollowed out, empty. And then the chapel doors opened. I felt them before I saw them. A shift in the air, a collective intake of breath from the mourners. I turned, and there they were. William and Margot Monroe. 20 years. It had been 20 years since I'd seen them in person. William looked older. His hair had gone completely silver, though it was styled expensively. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. His face was lined uncomfortable, like he didn't quite know where he was supposed to be. Margot looked unnervingly younger than 49. Botox had smoothed away any lines that might have suggested she'd lived through anything difficult. Her designer dress was black, appropriate for a funeral, but the cut, the jewelry, the Hermes bag, everything screamed money and maintenance. Her eyes, though, cold, calculating, scanning the room like she was appraising property. They walked down the center aisle and every head turned to watch. Whispers rippled through the chapel. Is that the parents? After all this time. They didn't approach me, didn't even look my direction. Instead, they slid into a pew near the back, sitting stiffly, faces carefully arranged into expressions of appropriate grief. I turned back to the casket, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. Of course they came. Of course they waited until she was dead. After the service ended, people filed past the casket to pay their respects. I stood beside it, shaking more hands, accepting more condolences, my eyes burning with unshed tears. Then they approached. William, first Margot, trailing behind like a shadow. Natalie, William said, his voice uncertain. You've grown so much. I stared at him. 20 years, and that's what he had to say. 20 years. I said, my voice flat and cold as ice. That's how long it took you to notice. He flinched. Margot stepped forward, her hand reaching out. I stepped back. Sweetheart, she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. I'm so sorry we couldn't be here sooner. Sooner. I cut her off, my voice rising despite myself. You had 20 years. You were never here, not once. We had to build our careers. William started. And Grandma Rosalind built me. I snapped. Where were you when I learned to ride a bike? When I graduated high school? When I got into law school? When I needed parents? Silence. The remaining mourners had stopped moving, watching us with wide eyes. Margot's expression hardened. We're here now. For her funeral, I said, gesturing to the casket. How convenient. Natalie, that's not fair. Fair. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You want to talk about fair? You abandoned me when I was 7 years old. You stopped calling when I was 10. You didn't send birthday cards, Christmas cards, nothing for 15 years. And now you show up dressed like you're going to a country club at the funeral of the woman who actually raised me, and you think you have the right to talk to me about fair. My voice had risen to a shout. People were staring openly now. Alexander Reed appeared at my elbow, his hand gentle on my arm. Natalie, he murmured. Not here. He was right. This wasn't the place. But I couldn't stop myself from adding one more thing. You weren't her family, I said, my voice shaking with rage and grief. You weren't mine. You gave up that right a long time ago. William's face had gone pale. Margot's mouth pressed into a thin, angry line. They turned and walked away, their expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor. I watched them leave, my whole body trembling. Alexander stayed beside me, his presence steady. You okay? No, and I whispered, but I will be. He nodded. They'll contest the will. You know that. I know. We'll be ready. I know. I said again, thinking of the safe deposit box, the 20 letters, the video, will, the documents from 1998. She made sure of it. I was standing by the chapel doors when they walked to their car, a sleek black Mercedes parked in the front row. Margot paused before getting in, turning to look back at me across the parking lot. Her voice carried clearly in the spring air. We'll see you at the will reading, Natalie. This isn't over. My blood turned to ice. Alexander's jaw tightened beside me. Let her talk. We have everything we need. But as I watched them drive away, Grandma Rosalind's warning echoed in my head. They're coming. Stand firm. The battle was just beginning. 2 days after the funeral, I sat in Alexander Reed's downtown office facing the parents who'd abandoned me and waiting for a bomb to explode. The conference room occupied the 20th floor of a glass tower with panoramic views of Austin stretching out below. Under different circumstances, it might have been beautiful. Today, it felt like a cage. I sat on one side of the long mahogany table, my hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking. Across from me, William and Margot occupied chairs like they were sitting in judgment backs, straight expressions, carefully neutral, expensive clothes, perfectly pressed. They'd brought a lawyer. Some local attorney I didn't recognize, a middle-aged man in a gray suit who kept glancing nervously between all of us like he sensed the storm brewing. Alexander sat at the head of the table, a leather portfolio open before him. His gray eyes were calm, professional. Beside him sat Karen Thornton, his senior paralegal, ready to notarize and witness. The tension in the room was suffocating. Thank you all for coming. Alexander began, his voice formal. We're here today for the reading of the last will and testament of Rosalind Ann Monroe, deceased, March 12th, 2024. Margot shifted in her seat, leaning forward slightly. William's jaw was tight. Alexander opened the portfolio and withdrew several documents. The will was executed on August 15, 2022, in the presence of witnesses and has been duly filed with the probate court. He began to read. Legal language washed over the room, whereas in heretofore sound mind and disposing memory, all the formal phrases that turned a person's final wishes into binding law. I'd heard this language 1,000 times in my legal training, but hearing it applied to Grandma Rosalind made my chest tighten. The estate of Rosalind Ann Monroe consists of the following assets, Alexander continued. Monroe Legal Consulting valued at approximately $195 million. Real property, including the primary residence and 3 investment properties valued at $42 million. Investment portfolios, retirement accounts, and liquid assets totaling $43 million. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. Total estate value approximately $280 million. Margot's eyes gleamed. William straightened in his chair. Their lawyer pulled out a notepad pen, poised. Alexander's voice remained steady. The distribution is as follows. I leave my entire estate in its entirety to my granddaughter, Natalie Elizabeth Monroe, with full confidence that she will honor the legacy we built together. Silence. Absolute ringing silence. William blinked. What? No other beneficiaries are named. Alexander continued, reading directly from the document. All assets, property, and holdings pass solely to Natalie Elizabeth Monroe. Nothing! Margot's voice rose sharply. She left us nothing. The will is very clear, Mrs. Monroe. Ms. Natalie Monroe is the sole heir. William's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. This can't be right. We're her family. Her son, I'm her son. The decedent made her wishes explicitly clear, Alexander said calmly. However, she did leave something for you, Mr. Monroe. He reached into the portfolio and withdrew a sealed envelope, sliding it across the table. William stared at it like it might bite him. Then with trembling hands, he picked it up, broke the seal, and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. I watched his face as he read, watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched his throat work as he swallowed. The letter was brief, I could see that much from where I sat. Just a few lines in Grandma Rosalind's elegant handwriting. When William finished reading, he crumpled the paper in his fist, his hand shaking violently. "What does it say?" Margot demanded, reaching for it. William didn't answer, didn't look at her, just stared at the table, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. Margot snatched the crumpled paper from his hand, smoothed it out, and read. Her face went white, then red, then twisted with rage. "This is fraud," she hissed, slamming the letter onto the table. "Your mother was old, she was sick, she was clearly not in her right mind. Justice Monroe was of completely sound mind until her final day." Alexander interrupted smoothly. "We have extensive medical documentation proving her mental competency, signed by Dr. C. Emily Bradford, witnessed by multiple healthcare professionals. Then she was manipulated." Margot spat her eyes, snapping to me. "This girl poisoned her against us. She got into her grandmother's head, isolated her, turned her against her own son." "I didn't have to," I said quietly. The room went silent. I stood planting my hands on the table, looking Margot directly in the eyes. "I didn't have to poison her against you. You did that yourselves when you dropped me off at her house and never came back." "We had reasons," William started. "So did she." I cut him off. "She had 20 years of reasons, 20 years of birthdays you missed, 20 years of phone calls you didn't make, 20 years of watching me grow up while you were busy doing anything else." "We're your parents," Margot said, her voice shaking with fury. "We have rights, legal rights to contest this will. You manipulated an elderly woman." "I was 7 years old when you left me," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "What was I supposed to manipulate her with my crayons, my teddy bear?" "This isn't over," Margot hissed. "We're her family. We have standing. We'll challenge this in court. We'll prove she was incompetent or coerced or—" "Then do it," I said, my voice steady, now cold as ice. "Sue me, take me to court. Let a judge hear how you abandoned your daughter for 20 years and then showed up the moment there was money involved." Margot's face contorted with rage. "You have no idea what you're up against." "Neither do you." William finally spoke, his voice rough. "Let's go, Margot." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Margot followed, grabbing her purse, her movements sharp and angry. Their lawyer scrambled to gather his things. "Ms. Monroe," he said, trying for professionalism, "you'll be hearing from us shortly." The door slammed behind them, hard enough to rattle the glass walls. The silence they left behind felt deafening. I sank back into my chair, suddenly exhausted, my hands trembling. Alexander remained calm, closing the portfolio with quiet efficiency. "That went better than expected," he said. I laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Better? They didn't flip the table. I consider that a win." Despite everything, I smiled, just slightly. Alexander reached into his briefcase and withdrew another envelope. This one was sealed with red wax, stamped with Rosalind's initials. "Your grandmother left this for you," he said, sliding it across the table, "with very specific instructions to be opened only when they file the lawsuit." I picked up the envelope, feeling its weight, heavier than a simple letter, something more inside. I held it up to the light. Through the paper, I could just make out Grandma Rosalind's handwriting. "My dearest Natalie, if you're reading this, it means they've done exactly what I predicted. Don't be afraid. I've been preparing for this battle for 20 years. Here's how we win." My hands tightened around the envelope. Outside the office windows, Austin stretched out below the city where I'd grown up, where Grandma Rosalind had built her legacy, where I'd become who I was. The war had officially begun, and I had an army of evidence at my back. The lawsuit arrived 8 days later. They didn't waste time. A thick manila envelope waited outside my apartment door, certified mail, the kind that never brings good news. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Pierce and Associates, LLP attorneys at law. The letterhead made my stomach drop. Pierce and Associates were sharks, the kind you hired to destroy someone, not just beat them. William Thomas Monroe and Margot Lynn Monroe. Plaintiffs, Vita Natalie Elizabeth Monroe. Defendant, I scanned the document, legal training kicking in despite the panic. The plaintiffs allege that the defendant exerted undue influence over the decedent, Rosalind Ann Monroe, during declining health and mental capacity. The defendant systematically isolated the decedent from her biological son, manipulated her affections, and exploited her vulnerability to secure a $280 million estate. Undue influence, manipulation, exploitation. They were painting me as a predator who'd spent 20 years grooming an elderly woman for her money. The petition demanded the will be voided and the estate split equally, 50% to them, 50% to me. Half of everything Grandma Rosalind and I had built. At the bottom, Randall Pierce lead counsel. By afternoon, the story had exploded. Karen knocked on my office door, her face pale. "You need to see this." The headline screamed, "Billionaire's granddaughter sued by biological parents in 280 memoirs battle." Below it, 2 photos. William and Margot outside a law office looking somber and dignified, grieving family fighting for justice. Next to it, me, leaving the courthouse face hard expression cold. I looked exactly like what they were painting me as, ruthless, calculating. Their attorney was quoted, "My clients are heartbroken. They lost a beloved mother and are fighting against a granddaughter who isolated her from family for decades." I opened social media. The hashtags were trending. Monroe inheritance, see family betrayal. Gold digger granddaughter, disgusting. Where were the parents for 20 years? Convenient timing. She manipulated an old woman, hope she loses everything. Parents abandoned her and now want money trash. The internet had split down the middle. Alexander called an emergency meeting that evening. "Randall Pierce," he said grimly. "I've faced him before. He's ruthless and plays dirty." How dirty? He'll dig into every aspect of your life, every conversation with your grandmother, every transaction. He'll twist anything to look like manipulation. But I have the letters. The video will. And we'll use them. But discovery works both ways. They'll depose you. It'll be brutal. They'll paint you as cold, calculating, opportunistic. What's our strategy? We document everything, Norman interjected. Every contribution you made, every hour you worked. We prove you earned your place. Alexander nodded. Let them attack first. The truth is patient. His words echoed Grandma Rosalind's. That night, I opened the sealed envelope Alexander had given me. Inside were pages in Rosalind's handwriting. "My dearest Natalie, if you're reading this, they've filed suit. I knew they would. Here's what you need. A timeline documenting every instance of William and Margot's absence. A witness list, employees, clients, colleagues who could testify to Rosalind's sharpness. Financial records proving my contributions. At the bottom, I know you're afraid, don't be. You have everything you need, let them attack. The truth will speak louder than their lies." Tears blurred the words. The next morning I went to the bank. The safe deposit box held everything Rosalind had promised. A USB drive video will, August 2022. 20 envelopes 2005 through 2024. Every birthday letter, a 2-decade paper trail of love and sound mind. Medical files from Dr. Bradford documenting Rosalind's mental competency through her illness. Financial records showing my salary, bonuses, contributions to Monroe Legal's $280 million growth. Photographs. Dozens. Me at 8, 10, 15, 20, 25, always with Grandma Rosalind. Graduations, birthdays, holidays. 20 years of proof we'd built a life together. Not a single photo included William or Margot. At the bottom, another sealed envelope, aged yellowed. A note, use only if necessary, nuclear option. I didn't open it, not yet. My phone rang as I left the bank. Unknown number. I answered. "Natalie," Margot's voice smooth and controlled. "We need to talk, face to face." "We have nothing to talk about. Don't be childish. Let's settle this like civilized people. Coffee tomorrow. Neutral location." "There's nothing to settle. You filed a lawsuit because you forced our hand. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can negotiate." I hesitated. "Unless," Margot added, mocking, "you're afraid to face us." My jaw clenched. That tone, the same condescension from when I was 7. "Fine, send me the address." 2 o'clock tomorrow. Come alone, Natalie. No lawyers, just family. She hung up. I stood on the sidewalk, immediately regretting my decision. I should call Alexander. But a part of me, the 7-year-old who'd never gotten answers, needed to face them one more time. To show them I wasn't that scared little girl anymore. I didn't realize I was walking straight into a trap. The cafe was crowded exactly as I'd hoped. Witnesses everywhere. Or at least I thought that would protect me. I'd chosen the location deliberately, a popular coffee shop in downtown Austin during the lunch rush. Small tables packed close together, the constant hum of conversation, the hiss of the espresso machine, 30, maybe 40 people crammed into the space. Safety in numbers, I'd told myself. I arrived 15 minutes early and claimed a table in the center of the room. Not tucked away in a corner where a quiet conversation could happen unnoticed, but right in the middle where everyone could see and hear. My phone sat in my purse recording app activated. Alexander had insisted on it. Never meet with opposing parties without documenting it, he'd said. Especially not them. At exactly 2:10 p.m., William and Margot walked in. William looked uncomfortable, shoulders hunched, eyes scanning the room like he wanted to be anywhere else. Margot walked with her head-high designer sunglasses perched in her perfectly styled hair, her mess bag swinging from her arm. They sat across from me without greeting. No pleasantries, no pretense of familial warmth. Margot ordered a cappuccino. William asked for black coffee. I didn't order anything. My stomach was too tight to handle caffeine. "Let's get to the point," Margot said the moment the barista walked away. "This lawsuit is expensive and public. Neither of us wants a prolonged battle." "Then drop it," I said evenly. "Don't be ridiculous." She leaned forward, her voice low but sharp. 50-50, Natalie. We split everything. Everyone walks away satisfied. You had 20 years to be satisfied with having a daughter. You chose not to be. We had to build our careers. William interjected, his tone defensive. We needed time to establish ourselves. Time. I cut him off, my voice rising despite myself. I gave you 20 years of time. You didn't call. Not once after I turned 10. You're being dramatic, Margot said dismissively. Name one birthday you called me for. I challenged, staring directly at her. Just one. William looked away. Margot's jaw tightened. That's what I thought. This isn't about the past, Margot started. Everything about this is about the past, I said. You don't get to pretend 20 years didn't happen just because there's money on the table now. Our voices had risen. People at nearby tables were glancing over conversations, pausing. Margot's face flushed with anger. Your grandmother poisoned you against us. She got into your head. No, I said firmly. You did that yourselves when you drove away and never looked back. We gave you life, William said. And she gave me everything else, I shot back. Margot's hands clenched into fists on the table. We are your parents. You owe us. I don't owe you anything. I stood abruptly in my chair, scraping loudly against the floor. The cafe had gone quieter now, more people openly watching. This conversation is over. I turned to leave. Margot lunged to her feet, her hand shooting out to grab my shoulder. She spun me around with surprising force. Don't you dare walk away from me. Let go. You ungrateful little... Crack! The slap echoed through the cafe like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side from the force of it, my cheek exploding with heat. For a second, I couldn't process what had just happened. The sound seemed to hang in the air, impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Every conversation stopped, every head turned. My hand flew to my face, feeling the sting, the burn spreading across my cheekbone. Not from physical pain, though that was real enough, but from the shock, the humiliation. The visceral reminder of being 7 years old and utterly powerless. Tears sprang to my eyes, not because it hurt, because it meant something. She'd hit me, in public, in front of dozens of witnesses. My own mother had just assaulted me over money. The cafe remained frozen in stunned silence. Margot. William's voice finally broke through, horrified. What did you... She deserved it. Margot hissed, no remorse in her voice. None at all, just cold fury. I forced myself to speak, though my voice shook. You just made a very big mistake. A man at a nearby table stood up, his phone in his hand. "That's assault. Someone call the police." "I already did," a woman said from across the room, her phone pressed to her ear. I realized dully that at least half a dozen people had their phones out, recording, filming, capturing every second of what had just happened. Within 2 minutes, sirens wailed outside. 2 Austin Police Department officers pushed through the cafe door, hands resting on their belts. The taller one, Officer Ramirez, according to his name tag, surveyed the room. "We got a call about an assault." The man who'd stood up pointed at Margot. "That woman just struck her. Multiple witnesses." Officer Ramirez turned to me. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I nodded, my hand still pressed to my burning cheek. "She hit me. My mother hit me." His expression hardened. "I'll need statements from everyone who saw this." The second officer, a woman named Reynolds, approached Margot. "Ma'am, we have multiple witnesses saying you struck this woman. Is that true?" "She's my daughter." Margot said, her voice dripping with indignation. "I have the right to discipline." "She's 27 years old," Officer Reynolds interrupted. "This is assault and battery." "This is ridiculous." "Ma'am, turn around and put your hands behind your back." William stepped forward. "Officer, please, this is just a family dispute." "Sir, step back," Officer Ramirez said firmly. "This is an active arrest." I watched numb as Officer Reynolds cuffed Margot's wrists behind her back. Margot's face contorted with rage and disbelief. "You're arresting me. She's the one who stole—" "You have the right to remain silent," Officer Reynolds began. "I suggest you use it." They led her toward the door. Margot twisted back to look at me, her expression venomous. "This isn't over, Natalie." The cafe door swung shut behind them. Officer Ramirez turned to me. "I'll need your statement, and I need to ask, do you want to press charges?" I met his eyes, my hand still on my cheek, feeling the heat, the sting, the weight of 20 years of abandonment crystallized into a single moment of violence. "Yes," I said clearly, "I want to press charges." The next hour was a blur. Officer Ramirez took my statement. I showed him the recording on my phone, every word of our argument captured in crystal clear audio. Over 10 witnesses gave their contact information. Some showed the officers their own videos filmed from different angles. A barista brought me ice wrapped in a cloth napkin. I pressed it to my face, watching as the officers worked. William had left without saying a word to me. Chasing after Margot, probably. By the time the police finished the incident, report was filed. Assault and battery. Margot would be processed, booked, and held until bail was set. Later, I learned it was $5,000. I sat alone in the cafe after everyone had left, my hand pressed to my still throbbing cheek. The assault report had been filed. The videos were already uploading to social media. I could see people around me on their phones, typing furiously, sharing, commenting. My own phone buzzed incessantly in my purse. I pulled it out. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. The notifications wouldn't stop. Someone had already posted a video with the caption, "Mother slaps daughter during 280 Menors inheritance battle." I clicked on it. The angle was perfect. You could see Margot grab me, spin me around, hear her yell, see her hand connect with my face. You could see my shock, my tears, hear the cafe gasp. 3 million views. In 4 hours. Mother slaps daughter over inheritance dispute was trending nationally. The comments poured in. "This is disgusting. The parents are monsters. She abandoned her daughter for 20 years and now assaults her, lock her up. Team Natalie all the way. Her parents are garbage." I set the phone down, my hands shaking. Margot had just handed me the lawsuit. She just didn't know it yet. By evening, the video had 3 million views. By midnight, 10 million. By morning, my life had changed completely. I watched it happen in real time from my apartment, my phone buzzing nonstop, notifications flooding in faster than I could read them. The video spread like wildfire across every platform: Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Someone had edited it with slow motion and sound enhancement, making the slap even more visceral. The hashtag inheritance slap was trending #1 worldwide. The media narrative had shifted overnight. Mother arrested after slapping daughter in public over inheritance. Viral video shows parental violence in billionaire estate battle. Internet rallies behind slapped heiress. The comments section had become a courtroom of public opinion, and the verdict was clear. They abandoned her for 20 years, and now they assault her for money monsters. The That slap told me everything I need to know about who the real villain is here. Team Natalie all the way. Her parents are absolute garbage. The audacity to claim she manipulated her grandmother when she's the one being physically attacked. 80% of comments supported me. The tide had turned completely. News stations called. Morning shows wanted interviews. Podcasts requested appearances. I ignored them all and stayed inside. Alexander called that afternoon. "Have you seen the news?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Hard to miss it. This changes everything. Public opinion has shifted dramatically in your favor. But Natalie, the trial is still 6 weeks away. We can't get complacent. When is it? Early May. First week. Judge Garrett's already set the date. He paused. Margot's assault charge will be handled separately, but it helps our case immensely. A mother who physically attacks her daughter in public over money doesn't look like someone fighting for justice. What's next? Strategy meeting tomorrow. We'll prepare your testimony, review evidence, anticipate their attacks. His voice softened. But tonight rest. You've earned it. I hung up and looked around my apartment, Grandma Rosalind's apartment, technically, though it was mine now. Everything here carried her presence, her books, her furniture, her carefully curated life. I couldn't rest. At 11 p.m., I found myself in her office. My office now, I reminded myself, but it still felt like hers. The leather chair, the mahogany desk, the bookshelves lined with legal texts and case files. On the desk sat the wooden box from the safe deposit box, simple, elegant, holding 20 envelopes. I'd read each letter once on my birthday the year it was written. Then I'd carefully tucked it away, saving it like a treasure. But I'd never read them all together, never seen the full arc of what Grandma Rosalind had been trying to tell me. Tonight I needed to. I opened the box. 20 envelopes lay inside, each one labeled in her elegant script. 2005, age 8. 2006, age 9. 2024, age 27. I spread them across the desk in chronological order, a timeline of my life laid out in cream-colored paper and fountain pen ink. Then I started reading. Age 8, 2005. My dearest Natalie, happy birthday, my sweet girl. I know you're wondering why they didn't call. It's not your fault. You are smart, kind, brave, and more than enough exactly as you are. Never let anyone, not even your parents, make you believe otherwise. You are enough. You always have been. I remembered receiving this letter, 3 days after the birthday card that arrived late. I'd read it through tears, wanting desperately to believe her words. Now, 20 years later, I finally did. Age 12, 2009. You asked me today if you should stop hoping they'll come back. My heart broke, but I told you the truth. Hope is a choice. Letting go is too. Choose whatever brings you peace, sweetheart. The people who matter don't leave, and the people who leave don't matter. The last phone call from William had been on my 10th birthday. By 12, I'd realized he wasn't calling again. Age 16, 2013. Your father called today. After 9 years of silence, he wanted to reconnect. I asked why now. He admitted his company was struggling financially, thought I might help out. I said no. You deserve better than a father who only remembers you when he needs something. I'd never known about that call. Grandma Rosalind had shielded me from it, protected me from the knowledge that William had reached out not for me, but for money. Even then, she'd been building the case, documenting the pattern. Age 21, 2019. You graduated law school today, top of your class. Your father didn't come. I'm not surprised. But I was there, and I have never been more proud. You are the daughter I raised, even if I'm not your mother. I remembered that day. Scanning the audience, some small part of me still hoping to see William and Margot. The disappointment when I didn't. But Grandma Rosalind had been front row beaming, cheering louder than anyone else. Age 26, 2023. The doctor says I have a year, maybe less. I'm not afraid of dying, Natalie. I'm afraid of leaving you unprotected. That's why I'm writing these letters. When they come for you, and they will remember this. You earned every dollar by being here when they weren't. My hands shook holding this one. Written just after her diagnosis, when she'd already started preparing for the battle I'd have to fight alone. Age 27, 2024. The final letter. The one I'd read just days after she died. My dearest Natalie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't cry too long. Stand firm. The truth is, your shield. These 20 letters aren't just sentiments, they're evidence. Documentation of 20 years they chose to be absent. In 6 weeks, you'll stand in a courtroom. Read these letters aloud. Let the world hear what I saw. A little girl who was abandoned but never broken. A woman who was loved because she deserved to be. I'm so proud of you, I always will be. Grandma. I finished the last letter at 3 a.m. Tears streamed down my face, but not from grief, from clarity. These letters weren't just memories, they were weapons. Each one documented a moment of abandonment, a choice William and Margot had made to prioritize everything else over their daughter, a pattern spanning 2 decades. Grandma Rosalind hadn't just loved me. She'd been building a case for 20 years. Every birthday letter was evidence. Every reassurance was documentation. Every moment of comfort was proof that she'd been my family when they weren't. The wooden box sat before me holding 20 years of love disguised as legal strategy. Brilliant, devastating, perfect. I carefully gathered the letters, placing them back in the box in order. In 6 weeks, I'd stand in a courtroom and read them aloud. And my mother would finally understand the cost of walking away. But first, I had to survive what was coming. 6 weeks flew by in a blur of depositions, strategy sessions, and sleepless nights. And then on a gray Monday morning in May, I walked back into that Austin courtroom, this time ready to fight. The space looked exactly the same as it had 2 months ago during the will reading. Same oak-paneled walls, same tall windows letting in pale spring light, same mahogany tables and leather chairs, but everything felt different. I walked in beside Alexander, my heels clicking against the polished floor. The gallery was packed, journalists, lawyers, curious members of the public who'd followed the viral slap video. Every seat filled. William and Margot sat at the plaintiff's table with Randall Pierce between them. Margot wore a navy dress perfectly tailored, her expression composed. The assault charge was still pending, but she'd made bail and was here playing the role of grieving daughter, fighting for justice. William looked uncomfortable, his shoulders tense, eyes flicking between his wife and the judge's bench. I took my seat beside Alexander, my hands folded on the table, steady, ready. All rise, the Honorable Judge Leonard Garrett presiding. The courtroom stood as Judge Garrett entered, the same tall, silver-haired man who'd presided over the will reading. His black robes swished as he climbed to his seat. Be seated. We sat. Judge Garrett adjusted his glasses and surveyed the courtroom. When his eyes found mine, something passed across his face. Recognition. Respect. Before we begin, he said, his voice carrying through the room, I must make a disclosure for the record. The courtroom went silent. Justice Rosalind Monroe was a colleague and mentor of mine 30 years ago. I clerked for her when she sat on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. She taught me more about the law than anyone else in my career. He paused. In the interest of transparency, I will recuse myself from this case if either party objects. Randall Pierce stood smoothly. No objection, Your Honor. We trust in your impartiality. Alexander rose. No objection, Your Honor. Judge Garrett nodded. Let the record reflect that both parties have waived their right to object to any potential conflict of interest. We'll proceed. He picked up his gavel. Mr. Pierce, your opening statement. Randall Pierce stood buttoning his expensive suit jacket. Mid-50s, sharp features, the kind of lawyer who made opposing counsel nervous. He approached the jury box, or where a jury would sit if this were a jury trial. In probate court, Judge Garrett would decide alone. Your Honor. Pierce began, his voice smooth and confident. This case is about a vulnerable elderly woman who was systematically isolated from her only son. He gestured toward William. For 20 years, William Monroe tried to reconnect with his mother. For 20 years, he was blocked at every turn by the defendant, Natalie Monroe. He turned his gaze, landing on me like an accusation. Ms. Monroe controlled every aspect of Justice Rosalind Monroe's life in her final years. She controlled phone calls, visitors, medical decisions. She created an environment where Justice Monroe became dependent on her and only her. Pierce clicked a remote. A screen descended behind him, displaying an email. This is correspondence from Ms. Monroe to her grandmother's doctor, requesting that all medical information be sent directly to her, bypassing Justice Monroe's son entirely. The email looked damning taken out of context. What it didn't show was that Rosalind herself had requested it, wanting me to coordinate her care, because William hadn't bothered to call in 15 years. And when Justice Monroe was at her weakest, dying, confused on high doses of pain medication, Ms. Monroe pressured her to change her will. Pierce's voice rose with righteous anger. This is textbook undue influence, a predator taking advantage of a vulnerable victim. Whispers rippled through the gallery. Pierce returned to his seat satisfied. I wanted to scream, to stand up and shout that every word was a lie. But Alexander's hand touched my arm, steadying me. "Patience," he murmured. The plaintiffs called Brenda Walsh to the stand. A woman in her 40s approached the witness box, neat hair, professional attire, the picture of a trustworthy healthcare worker. After being sworn in, she settled into the chair, hands folded primly. "Ms. Walsh." Pierce began, "Please tell the court your relationship to the deceased." I was Justice Monroe's private nurse from 2021 through 2023. A lie, but delivered with perfect confidence. "And during that time, what did you observe about the defendant's behavior?" Natalie monitored all of Justice Monroe's phone calls. Brenda said, her voice earnest. "She wouldn't let anyone visit without her approval. I saw her pressure Justice Monroe about the will multiple times, especially in those final months." My hands clenched beneath the table. "And Justice Monroe's mental state?" Pierce asked. "She seemed afraid," Brenda said softly. "Afraid of contradicting Natalie, like she was worried about what would happen if she didn't do what Natalie wanted." "Thank you, Ms. Walsh. No further questions." Alexander didn't cross-examine, just sat there taking notes, his expression unreadable. I leaned toward him. "That's not true, none of it." "I know," he said calmly. "Let her talk." Pamela Cooper testified next, supposedly a neighbor who'd witnessed my controlling behavior. Her testimony was brief, less detailed than Brenda's, but still damaging. Then a third witness, a vague family friend, who claimed to have visited twice and been turned away by me. All lies, all delivered convincingly. Finally, Randall Pierce called Margot to the stand. She walked to the witness box like she was walking a red carpet designer dress, perfect makeup, every hair in place. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. If only. "Mrs. Monroe." Pierce began gently, "Tell the court about your relationship with your mother-in-law." Margot's eyes glistened, actual tears, on command. "I loved her," she said, her voice breaking. "I just wanted her to know that I loved her." "And did you try to maintain contact?" "I tried so many times. Calls, letters. I even drove to her house once, but Natalie turned me away at the door." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I lost 20 years with my daughter, and now I've lost my mother-in-law too. All I'm asking for is justice." Some people in the gallery looked sympathetic. A few nodded. I felt sick. This was the woman who'd slapped me in public 3 weeks ago, who'd called me ungrateful, who'd abandoned me when I was 7 and never looked back. Now she was playing the victim and people were believing her. When court adjourned for the day, I felt hollowed out. Alexander gathered his files calmly. "Don't worry, tomorrow we dismantle them." He slid a folder across the table. "Brenda Walsh, personnel file, 2020-2021. I opened it. The first page was a termination letter on Monroe legal letterhead. Termination for cause embezzlement of company funds. I looked up at Alexander. A small smile played at his lips. "Tomorrow," he said. As we left the courtroom, I glanced back. William stood near the plaintiff's table, watching Margot as she spoke to Randall Pierce. For the first time since the trial began, he was really watching her. Not just standing beside her, but observing, studying. Something in his expression had shifted. Doubt, regret. I couldn't be sure. But tomorrow it wouldn't matter. Tomorrow, Alexander would expose their lies one by one. Day 2 began with Alexander Reed standing and saying one sentence that changed the entire trial. "Your Honor, we need to address yesterday's witnesses." Judge Garrett looked up from his notes. "Proceed, Mr. Reed." The defense recalls Brenda Walsh to the stand. A ripple of surprise ran through the courtroom. Randall Pierce glanced at his notes, frowning. Margot leaned toward him, whispering urgently. Brenda Walsh walked back to the witness box, still confident. She'd delivered her lies smoothly yesterday. She thought she'd gotten away with it. She was wrong. Ms. Walsh. Alexander began, his voice calm and measured. You testified yesterday that you were Justice Monroe's private nurse from 2021 through 2023. Is that correct? Yes, I cared for her throughout her illness. And you claim to have witnessed Natalie manipulating her grandmother? I saw it with my own eyes. Alexander nodded slowly, then reached for a document. Your Honor, Defense Exhibit B personnel records from Monroe Legal Consulting. He pressed a button. The screen behind him lit up with an employment file. Ms. Walsh, did you ever work for Monroe Legal Consulting? Brenda hesitated. Just for a second. I did work there briefly, in an administrative capacity. You were hired as an office manager in January 2020, and you were terminated in November 2021. Correct. Brenda's face paled. That's not relevant. You were fired for embezzling $15,000 from company funds. The courtroom exploded into whispers. Alexander clicked to the next slide. A termination letter filled the screen, Monroe Legal letterhead clearly visible. This is your termination letter signed by Justice Rosalind Monroe herself. He read aloud. Brenda Walsh is terminated for cause due to financial misconduct involving theft of company funds. While criminal prosecution was recommended, I have chosen leniency and will allow her to resign quietly to avoid a criminal record. Brenda's hands shook. She ruined my career. She destroyed my reputation. So you lied under oath to get revenge, and because the plaintiffs paid you— Objection! Randall Pierce shot to his feet. Speculation! I'll rephrase. Ms. Walsh, how much were you paid to testify? I wasn't paid. Alexander produced another document. You deposited $10,000 into your bank account 3 days after agreeing to testify. The money came from an account linked to William Monroe. He displayed the bank statement on screen. There it was clear as day. The courtroom erupted. Judge Garrett's gavel cracked like thunder. Order! He turned to Brenda, his expression furious. Ms. Walsh, I find you in contempt of court for perjury. Bailiff, take her into custody. No, please. Brenda stood panicking. I needed the money. They said it would be easy. 2 bailiffs approached. One of them produced handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Brenda sobbed as they cuffed her wrists, leading her down the aisle past rows of stunned observers. Her cries echoed through the courtroom until the doors swung shut behind her. Silence fell. I sat perfectly still, my face expressionless. But inside, I felt something crack, the first real hope since this nightmare began. Your Honor. Alexander continued, his voice cutting through the quiet. The defense would now like to address the character of the plaintiffs themselves. He clicked the remote again. Defense Exhibit C video footage from March 28, 2024. The screen filled with a familiar image. The cafe. That afternoon. My stomach tightened. The courtroom watched in silence as the scene played out. The argument escalating, voices rising, me standing to leave. Margot lunging forward, grabbing my shoulder, spinning me around. Her hand raised. The slap. The sound echoed through the courtroom's speakers, sharp, brutal, unmistakable. Someone gasped. I heard a woman in the gallery start crying. On screen, my face showed the shock, the pain, the humiliation. Tears in my eyes, my hand flying to my burning cheek. And Margot's voice cold and clear. She deserved it. The cafe patrons staring. Someone calling the police. Margot being cuffed and arrested, still raging. The video ended. The courtroom remained silent for a long moment. Then Judge Garrett spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. Mr. Reed, this video has been admitted into evidence. Yes, Your Honor, along with police reports documenting Mrs. Margot Monroe's arrest and subsequent charge of assault and battery, for which she is currently awaiting trial. I glanced at the plaintiff's table. Margot sat rigid, her face flushed with fury. Her jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might crack. William wouldn't look at the screen, wouldn't look at me. He stared at his hands, shoulders hunched, like he wanted to disappear. This, Alexander said quietly, is the loving mother who claims she only wanted to reconnect with her daughter. She assaulted Natalie in public, over money. Randall Pierce tried to object something about relevance, but Judge Garrett waved him off. Overruled. The character of the plaintiffs is absolutely relevant to claims of familial concern. Continue, Mr. Reed. The mood in the courtroom had shifted completely. Yesterday, some people had looked sympathetic to William and Margot. Today, every face in the gallery showed disgust. The defense calls Natalie Monroe to the stand. My heart hammered as I stood. The walk to the witness box felt impossibly long, every eye in the room following me. The clerk held out a Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I placed my hand on it, feeling its weight. I do. I sat my hands folded in my lap and looked at Alexander. He gave me a small, reassuring nod. Natalie, he began gently, please tell the court about the day your parents left you. I took a breath, steadying myself. This wasn't the 7-year-old story anymore. This was the truth seen through the eyes of a woman who'd survived. I was 7 years old. They drove me to my grandmother's house and said it would be just for a little while. But they never came back. When did they call? At first a few times a month, then less. By the time I was 10, they'd stopped calling completely. And how many times did they visit in 20 years? Never, not once. The courtroom was silent. Even the journalists had stopped typing. Who raised you, Natalie? My voice caught. My grandmother. She was my mother, my father, my teacher, my best friend. She was everything to me. Alexander paused, letting that sink in. Then, Natalie, how did you feel when your mother slapped you? The tears came before I could stop them. I felt exactly like I did when I was 7, I whispered. Like I wasn't wanted, like I wasn't loved, like I was just an obstacle in their way. And how did your grandmother make you feel? Loved, safe, like I mattered. I heard someone in the gallery sob. When I glanced over, I saw Donna Richards, the court reporter, wiping her eyes. William sat with his head bowed, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Margot stared straight ahead. Her jaw set her eyes hard. Thank you, Natalie, Alexander said softly. No further questions at this time. Randall Pierce stood slowly, his expression calculating. I'd been warned about this. He would try to break me, to paint me as cold, calculating, greedy, to make the jury know the judge see me as the villain. I gripped the edge of the witness box. This was where the real battle began. Randall Pierce approached the witness stand like a predator circling wounded prey. But I wasn't wounded. Not anymore. Ms. Monroe, he began, his voice sharp as a blade. Let's talk about your grandmother's medical care. I kept my hands folded in my lap, my spine straight. Alexander had prepared me for this. Every question, every trap. Of course, I said evenly. Pierce paced in front of the jury box, making sure every eye in the room was on him. You controlled her medications, didn't you? No. My voice didn't waver. Dr. Emily Bradford managed Grandma Rosalind's medications. Every change, every prescription approved by her and documented in the medical records. Alexander submitted them as Exhibit D. Pierce's jaw tightened. He glanced at his notes. But you were the one who administered them. I helped her take them, I clarified, just like any caregiver would, with Dr. Bradford's instructions and oversight. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Pierce shifted tactics. You controlled who visited her, didn't you? His tone turned accusatory. Isolated her from her family. I met his eyes. My grandmother chose who she wanted to see, and the people who abandoned her 20 years ago weren't on that list. Gasps echoed through the gallery. Judge Garrett banged his gavel once. Ms. Monroe, please answer the question directly. I nodded. I didn't control anything, Your Honor. Grandma Rosalind was of sound mind until the very end. She made her own decisions. Pierce's face flushed. Your Honor, the witness is being evasive. Overruled, Judge Garrett said flatly. She answered the question. Move on, counselor. Pierce exhaled sharply and turned back to me. Ms. Monroe, isn't it true that you isolated your grandmother from her son, your father, because you wanted the inheritance all to yourself? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. I leaned forward slightly. My father isolated himself. He didn't call. He didn't write. He didn't visit. For 20 years. That's not what I asked. And when my grandmother was dying, I continued my voice, steady but fierce. He still didn't come. Not until the will was read. Not until there was money to fight over. The courtroom fell silent. Even Pierce seemed momentarily stunned. Judge Garrett looked at him. "Do you have another question, Mr. Pierce?" Pierce cleared his throat. "Let's talk about Brenda Walsh." "Objection." Alexander stood smoothly. "Ms. Walsh has already been discredited and arrested for perjury. This line of questioning is irrelevant." "Sustained," Judge Garrett said. "Move on, Mr. Pierce." Pierce's confidence cracked. He shuffled his notes, searching for firmer ground. "Ms. Monroe," Pierce said, regaining his footing. "You had full access to your grandmother's financial accounts, didn't you?" "I had access," I said carefully, "but every transaction was overseen by our CPA Norman Price, our CFO, and the board of directors of Monroe Legal Consulting. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. There were checks and balances." Pierce smirked. "And what was your salary, Ms. Monroe?" I paused. This was the trap. $95,000 a year. The courtroom stirred. Pierce blinked. That wasn't the number he expected. 95,000, he repeated as if I'd misspoken. "Yes." I looked directly at the jury. "My grandmother insisted I earn a modest salary until I proved my ability. Even after I became a partner, I never took more than what was fair. I wasn't there for the money, Mr. Pierce. I was there because I loved her." Pierce stared at me, his opening line of attack collapsing. Judge Garrett leaned forward. "Counselor, do you have a follow-up?" Pierce shook his head, visibly rattled. Pierce took a breath and tried one last time. "Ms. Monroe, did you pressure your grandmother to remove your father from her will?" "No." "Did you ever discuss the will with her?" "She told me her intentions," I said. "I told her I didn't care about the money. I cared about her." Pierce's voice rose. "But you knew you'd inherit everything." "I knew," I interrupted, "that my grandmother had built everything herself, that she'd survived abandonment, betrayal, and loss, and that she wanted to leave what she built to the person who stayed." The words landed like a verdict. The jury looked at me not with pity, but with respect. Pierce's voice turned cold. "The only person who can confirm your story is dead." The courtroom went still. I didn't flinch. My grandmother is present in every employee who worked with her, in every letter she wrote me, in every document she prepared, and in the video, you'll see tomorrow. My voice cracked just slightly, but it wasn't weakness. It was love. She knew what she was doing, and she knew exactly who deserved her legacy. Judge Garrett's expression softened. Even Donna Richards, the court reporter, paused her typing. Pierce stood frozen for a moment. Then he straightened his tie. No further questions. He walked back to his table. William Monroe sat motionless, but I saw at the faintest nod of his head. Respect. Or maybe regret. Margot, on the other hand, glared at me with pure fury. Judge Garrett addressed me. "You may step down, Ms. Monroe." I rose from the witness stand on shaking legs and walked back to the defense table. Alexander met me halfway and rested a hand on my shoulder. "Perfect," he whispered. I sat down, my heart still racing. Across the aisle, Margot leaned toward her lawyer, whispering furiously. William stared straight ahead, his face unreadable. And on the defense table, in a polished wooden box, sat 20 sealed envelopes. 20 birthdays. 20 years of love. Tomorrow the world would hear her voice. Judge Garrett banged his gavel. "We'll reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. Court is adjourned." As the room emptied, I stared at the box. 20 years of evidence. 20 letters. And tomorrow everyone would know the truth. I wasn't just fighting for an inheritance. I was fighting for her. The next morning, Alexander carried a polished wooden box to the evidence table. Inside were 20 envelopes, 20 years of love documented and dated. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as he set the box down. Judge Garrett glanced at the plaintiff's table where William sat with his head bowed, and Margot stared straight ahead, her jaw tight. "Your Honor." Alexander began, his voice steady and clear. "The defense would like to introduce Exhibit E, 20 personal letters written by Judge Rosalind Monroe to her granddaughter, spanning from 2005 to 2024. He opened the box slowly, reverently, and began removing the envelopes one by one. Each was labeled in Grandma's precise handwriting, Natalie's 8th birthday, 2005, Natalie's 9th birthday, 2006, and so on all the way to Natalie's 27th birthday, 2024. Alexander arranged them in chronological order on the evidence table, a timeline of 2 decades laid bare for everyone to see. The gallery leaned forward, straining to catch a glimpse. Cameras in the back clicked softly, capturing the physical proof of Grandma's love. 20 envelopes, 20 birthdays, 20 years. Alexander picked up the first envelope. With the court's permission, he said, "I'd like to read excerpts from several of these letters." Judge Garrett nodded. "Proceed, Mr. Reed." Alexander opened the envelope marked 2005 and began to read. "My dearest Natalie, happy 8th birthday. I know you're wondering why your parents don't call anymore. I want you to know this. Their absence is not your fault. You are already more than enough. You have always been my greatest joy. Love, Grandma." My breath caught. I had read those words 100 times in private, but hearing them spoken aloud in this room in front of my father, in front of the jury, in front of the world, broke something open inside me. Tears slid down my cheeks. I didn't bother wiping them away. Around the courtroom, people reached for tissues. Donna Richards, the court reporter, paused her typing and dabbed at her eyes. Alexander set the first letter down and picked up the next. "Age 12, he said. "Today you asked me if you should stop hoping they'd come back. My heart broke, but I told you the truth. Hope is a choice, and so is letting go. Choose whatever brings you peace, my sweet girl." Across the aisle, William's head dropped into his hands. His shoulders shook. Margot's face remained stone. Alexander continued, his voice unwavering but thick with emotion. "Age 17. Natalie, today, you asked if you should try to reach out to your father. I told you only if you want to, not because you feel obligated. You are not responsible for fixing broken people. Focus on becoming the woman you want to be." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gallery. "Age 21. You graduated from law school today, top of your class. Your father didn't come, I wasn't surprised. But I was there front row bursting with pride. You are the daughter I raised even though I'm not your mother. I couldn't be prouder." Donna Richards wasn't even pretending to work anymore. She was openly crying. So were half the people in the gallery. Even Judge Garrett's eyes looked glassy. Alexander picked up the second to last envelope. "Age 26. The doctor says I have a year, maybe less. I'm not afraid of dying, Natalie. I'm afraid of leaving you without protection. When your parents come for you and they will remember this, you have earned every cent of what I'm leaving you. Not through manipulation, but by being here, by showing up, by loving me when they didn't." Margot shifted uncomfortably in her seat. William still hadn't looked up. Alexander's hand trembled slightly as he picked up the final envelope. "Age 27, the last letter." He paused, his voice thick. "My dearest Natalie, if you're reading this in a courtroom, it means they did exactly what I knew they would. Don't be afraid. These letters are not just my love for you. They are evidence. Evidence of 20 years they chose to be absent. Evidence of 20 years you chose to stay. Stand firm, my girl. The truth is your shield. I love you more than words can say. Always, Grandma." The courtroom fell into absolute silence. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The weight of her words spoken aloud after her death was unbearable and beautiful all at once. Alexander set the letter down gently and turned to face the jury. "Your Honor, these 20 letters document 2 decades of abandonment by the plaintiffs and 2 decades of love and presence by my client. Every birthday Judge Monroe wrote to Natalie. Every year she documented that William and Margot Monroe had no contact. This is not manipulation. This is evidence." Judge Garrett nodded slowly. "Noted, Mr. Reed." He looked at me. "Ms. Monroe, would you like to say anything?" I stood on shaking legs, my voice raw. Those letters saved my life. Every birthday when I felt like I wasn't wanted, Grandma reminded me that I was loved. I looked directly at my father. "She didn't turn me against you. She just picked up the pieces you left behind." William flinched. "I didn't demand this inheritance," I continued. "I don't need it. But Grandma wanted me to have it, and I will honor that." I sat down. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of muffled crying. Randall Pierce stood, his face pale. Your Honor, these letters are emotional, but they don't prove undue influence. Judge Garrett cut him off. They prove a pattern, Mr. Pierce. 20 years of systematic absence by your clients. If you want to continue, tread carefully. Pierce swallowed. No further questions at this time, Your Honor. Judge Garrett banged his gavel. We'll adjourn for the day. Court will reconvene at 9 a.m. tomorrow. As the room emptied, I carefully gathered the letters and placed them back in the box. Alexander rested a hand on my shoulder. That, he said quietly, was the turning point. I looked across the aisle. William was staring at me, tears streaming down his face. For the first time in 20 years, I saw something I'd never seen before. Remorse. Real painful remorse. Margot leaned toward him and whispered something sharp. William shook his head and gently pushed her hand away. Something had broken between them. When I left the courtroom, I locked eyes with William one last time. He mouthed something I couldn't quite make out. Maybe I'm sorry, maybe nothing at all. And Margot, she stared straight ahead, jaw-set, fists clenched. She wasn't done, not yet. Tomorrow would be the final blow. If you're still here, drop a comment so I know you're with me. Tell me honestly, if you were me, would you forgive them or would you let them face the consequences? Because what's about to be revealed in my grandmother's video, it's going to shock you. Just a note, the next part includes some fictionalized elements. If that bothers you, feel free to stop watching now. Day 3 began with Alexander calling a surprising lineup of witnesses, people who had worked alongside my grandmother for over a decade. Karen Thornton was first. She'd been the senior paralegal at Monroe Legal Consulting for 15 years, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, the kind of woman who noticed everything. Alexander stood at the podium. Ms. Thornton, in those 15 years, how many times did William or Margot Monroe visit the office? Karen didn't hesitate. Never. Not once. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. And did Natalie work at the firm? Every day. Karen looked directly at the jury. She was there at 7 in the morning and often stayed until 8 at night. She wasn't Judge Monroe's assistant, she was her partner. Pierce stood for cross-examination, but his questions were weak, grasping. Karen didn't budge. There were no cracks in her testimony. Next came Norman Price, a forensic accountant with 30 years' experience, and the demeanor of a man who dealt only in facts. Alexander handed him a thick binder. Mr. Price, can you summarize your findings? Norman adjusted his glasses. Certainly. Ms. Natalie Monroe's salary was $95,000 per year, modest considering her role as a partner. Over 5 years, the cases she personally brought in generated approximately $140 million in revenue. Company growth during that period, 60% attributable to her work. He flipped a page. As for Judge Monroe's personal accounts, I found no unusual transactions, no signs of financial manipulation. Ms. Monroe didn't take from this estate. She contributed to it significantly. Pierce Rowe's voice tight. These numbers could be fabricated. Norman cut him off. Every transaction is documented, audited with bank statements to corroborate. I'm a certified public accountant with 30 years' experience, Mr. Pierce. I don't fabricate numbers. Pierce sat back down. The final witness of the morning was Edward Collins, a soft-spoken man in his 60s who'd worked at the firm since its founding. Natalie wasn't just a lawyer, he said, voice thick with emotion. She volunteered at the community center Judge Monroe founded. She helped clients who couldn't afford us pro bono. She embodied everything Judge Monroe believed in. The gallery nodded. Even Donna Richards was blinking back tears again. By the time the lunch recess ended, the defense had built a fortress of credibility around me. But the real blow came that afternoon. Alexander stood. Your Honor, the defense would like to present Exhibit F Judge Rosalind Monroe's video, recorded 1 year before her death. A large screen was wheeled into the courtroom. The lights dimmed slightly. The screen flickered to life. There she was. Grandma Rosalind sitting in a law office, her face calm and clear. The timestamp in the corner read May 14, 2023, 1 year before this trial, 1 year before she died. A voice off camera, likely the lawyer. Please state your name. My name is Rosalind Monroe. Grandma said, her voice steady and strong. I am a former justice of the Texas Supreme Court. I am 71 years old. I am of sound mind and body. I gripped the edge of the table. I am making this video because I know my son and daughter-in-law will contest my will, so let me state my intentions once and for all." She folded her hands on the desk. "William, you are my son, and I once loved you. But 20 years ago, you made a choice. You chose your career over your daughter. You drove away and never looked back." William flinched in his seat. "I told you to call her. You didn't. I told you to visit. You didn't. I watched a little girl wait by the phone every birthday and you never called." Her gaze hardened. "Margot, I've seen through you long before Natalie did." Margot sat rigid, her jaw clenched. "And then Grandma said it. When Natalie was 7 years old, not long after you abandoned her, she accidentally spilled juice on your designer dress during one of your rare visits. You slapped her. Hard. She was only 7. The courtroom exploded. Gasps, angry whispers. I felt the room tilt. I saw the red mark on her cheek. Grandma continued, her voice cutting through the noise. "You told William it was an accident, that she fell, but I knew the truth. That was when I knew you would never be a real mother to her." William turned to Margot, his face white. "You told me she fell." Margot said nothing. Her hands were trembling. "Natalie didn't manipulate me." Grandma said, her voice softer now. "She loved me. She was there when I was sick. She held my hand through chemo. She built this firm with me not for money, but because she believed in what we were doing." Tears blurred my vision. "If you're watching this in a courtroom, William, I hope you understand I didn't choose Natalie over you. You chose your career over her. I just chose to be there when you weren't." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes fierce. "My will stands, every word." The video ended. The screen went dark. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Judge Garrett cleared his throat. "Mr. Pierce, do you have any objections to this evidence?" Pierce stood shakily. "Your Honor, this video is clearly biased. It's the testimony of the deceased." Judge Garrett interrupted. "Recorded when she had full legal capacity with witnesses present. It has legal standing. But the allegations against my client, are you suggesting," Judge Garrett said slowly, "that Judge Monroe, who served on the Texas Supreme Court for 30 years, is a liar?" Pierce swallowed. "No, Your Honor." "Then sit down." Pierce sat. Judge Garrett banged his gavel. "We'll adjourn for the day. Court will reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. As the courtroom emptied, I watched William and Margot leave separately. He didn't look at her, didn't wait for her. Something had broken between them. The next morning, day 4, was brief. Alexander called Dr. Emily Bradford, who testified that Grandma Rosalind had been fully lucid until her final week with no signs of confusion or diminished capacity. Pierce had nothing left. His case was in ruins. By the time the afternoon session ended, everyone in that courtroom knew the truth. The screen had gone dark, but Rosalind's words still hung in the air like a verdict. I looked at William, really looked at him, and saw the moment everything came crashing down. He'd lost his mother, he'd lost his daughter, and now he was losing his wife. Tomorrow the judge would deliver a verdict. But the truth was, the trial was already over. The afternoon of day 4 passed like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Pierce knew he'd lost. All of us did. Alexander presented the final pieces of evidence with methodical precision. Medical records, every doctor's visit, every test, every note confirming that Grandma Rosalind had been of sound mind until her final days. A communication timeline painstakingly documented showing 15 years of silence from William and Margot. Not a single phone call, not a single letter, not even a birthday card after the first few years. And then the photographs. Alexander had them enlarged and displayed on poster boards. 20 years of images. Me and Grandma at my 8th birthday, my high school graduation, my college acceptance, law school. Every milestone, every holiday, every ordinary Sunday morning. In every single photo, it was just the two of us. No William, no Margot. The gallery leaned forward, absorbing the visual proof of absence. Pierce stood, cleared his throat, and called his final witness a private investigator who claimed Natalie had controlled the household. Alexander didn't even look worried. "Mr. Harris," Alexander began during cross-examination, "how many hours did you observe my client and her grandmother?" The investigator shifted. "About 20 hours total, over 3 days." "And when was this?" "Last year, during the discovery phase. Alexander paused, letting the answer hang. So you observed a granddaughter caring for her dying grandmother, and you interpreted that as control. Harris hesitated. I guess so. No further questions. Pierce slumped in his chair. We have no further witnesses, Your Honor. Judge Garrett adjourned for the day. The next morning, day 5. The courtroom was packed. This was it, closing arguments. Pierce stood first. He looked defeated before he even opened his mouth. Your Honor. He began, his voice flat. This case is about family rights. My clients may not have been perfect parents, but they are still parents. The law recognizes blood relationships. William and Margot Monroe have legal rights to their mother's estate. He shuffled his notes. We ask the court to declare that the will was made under undue influence and restore fairness to this family. Even he didn't sound convinced. Thank you, he muttered and sat down. Margot glared at him, fury radiating from every inch of her body. He'd failed her. Alexander rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. He walked to the center of the courtroom and stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle. Then he spoke. Your Honor, this case is not complicated. In fact, it's very simple. His voice was calm, but it carried. 20 years ago, William and Margot Monroe made a choice. They left a 7-year-old girl at her grandmother's house and drove away. They promised they'd come back, but they never did. He turned slightly, addressing the room. They didn't call. They didn't visit. Eventually, they didn't even send birthday cards. They went on with their lives as if Natalie didn't exist. I felt my throat tighten. But Rosalind Monroe. Alexander's voice softened. She showed up every single day for 20 years. She raised a brilliant, compassionate, accomplished woman. She built a firm with Natalie, not for her, but with her. She documented everything, not because she was paranoid, but because she was wise. He paused, letting the words land. She knew this day would come. She knew William and Margot would show up the moment she was gone, and she prepared her granddaughter to fight. Alexander turned toward Pierce's table. Mr. Pierce wants you to believe this is about family rights. But family isn't biology, Your Honor. It's presence. It's showing up when things are hard. It's love without conditions. His voice rose slightly. Rosalind Monroe showed up. Natalie showed up. William and Margot. They only showed up when there was money involved. The courtroom was silent. The law doesn't reward abandonment, Alexander said firmly. It honors intent. And Judge Monroe's intent was crystal clear. She wanted to leave her estate to the person who earned it, not through manipulation, but through love. He walked closer to the bench, looking directly at Judge Garrett. Your Honor, Judge Monroe spent her life upholding the law. She knew exactly what she was doing when she made that will. She was fully competent. She was completely free of undue influence. She simply made a choice. He paused. Honor that choice. Honor her. Alexander returned to his seat and sat down. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Judge Garrett looked down at his notes, then back at the courtroom. I will render my verdict after a brief recess. 1 hour. The gavel struck. Alexander and I retreated to a small conference room down the hall. The hour stretched out like a lifetime. Do you think we won? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Alexander looked at me, his expression kind. I know we won, but the waiting is always the hardest part. 60 minutes felt like 6 hours. Finally, the bailiff appeared at the door. The judge is ready. We walked back into the courtroom. It was packed standing room only. Media lined the walls, cameras ready. The gallery was silent, tense, with anticipation. Judge Garrett entered. We all stood. He took his seat and we sat. He looked at the papers in front of him, then lifted his gaze. Judge Garrett looked up and met my eyes. For a moment, time stopped. This was it. 20 years of pain, 20 years of love, 20 years of truth, all coming down to the next words he would speak. I have reviewed all testimony and evidence. He began, his voice calm and measured, and I am prepared to render my verdict. When Judge Leonard Garrett returned to the bench, the courtroom was so silent I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. He looked down at his papers, then out at the packed gallery. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but I could feel the weight of every eye in the room. This court has reviewed extensive evidence over 5 days of testimony. He began, his voice measured and calm. I gripped the armrest of my chair. My knuckles went white. The plaintiffs allege undue influence and manipulation. He paused, a long, agonizing pause. In 30 years on the bench, I have presided over many cases, but few as clear as this one. My breath caught. The evidence shows that Judge Rosalind Monroe was not a weak, confused woman. She was a legal mind of the highest caliber, a woman who served on this state's Supreme Court with distinction for 3 decades. Judge Garrett looked up, his gaze sweeping the room. The plaintiffs have failed to prove any element of undue influence. Instead, the evidence overwhelmingly shows the following. He ticked off each point. Judge Monroe was fully competent until her death, as confirmed by medical testimony. She documented her intent clearly, both in writing and on video. Her granddaughter, Natalie Monroe, contributed significantly to building the disputed estate. The plaintiffs had no meaningful contact with Judge Monroe or Ms. Monroe for approximately 20 years, and when they finally made contact, it was immediately following Judge Monroe's death. I felt Alexander's hand on my shoulder steadying me. Judge Garrett's expression hardened as he looked directly at William and Margot. Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, I once knew Judge Rosalind Monroe. I clerked for her as a young attorney. She taught me that the law exists to protect the vulnerable and to honor truth. His voice dropped, but it carried. The vulnerable in this courtroom are not you. It's the 7-year-old child you left behind 20 years ago. The truth is not on your side. William's head dropped. Justice does not belong to those who share blood but abandon responsibility. It belongs to those who honor their commitments. Judge Garrett took a deep breath. Therefore, the court rules as follows. My heart stopped. The plaintiffs have failed to meet their burden of proof. The allegations of undue influence are dismissed in their entirety. A sob broke out somewhere in the gallery. The last will and testament of Rosalind Monroe is valid and shall be executed as written. The estate in its entirety belongs to Natalie Monroe. The courtroom exploded, but Judge Garrett wasn't finished. He raised his gavel once, and the room fell silent again. Furthermore, the court finds that the plaintiff's lawsuit was brought without merit and in bad faith. William Monroe and Margot Monroe are ordered to pay all legal fees incurred by the defendant in the amount of $425,000, as well as court costs in the amount of $18,000. Margot's face went white with rage. Additionally, Judge Garrett continued, Mrs. Margot Monroe, the criminal assault charges against you will be handled separately in criminal court. I recommend the prosecutor pursue this matter to the fullest extent of the law. He looked at both of them. Both plaintiffs are prohibited from contacting Miss Natalie Monroe without her clear written consent. His gavel came down. Court is adjourned. Bang. The sound echoed through the room. For one moment there was absolute silence, and then chaos. The gallery erupted. Some people cheered, others wept. The media rushed for the exits, already shouting into phones. Camera flashes lit up the hallway outside. I sat frozen, unable to move. Alexander squeezed my shoulder. You did it. The tears came then, not from sadness, but from something I couldn't name. Relief, exhaustion, grief for everything I'd lost and everything I'd fought for. Across the aisle, Margot shot to her feet. Her face was twisted with fury. As she passed me on her way out, she hissed, You took everything from us. I hope you're happy. I looked up at her, my voice steady. I didn't take anything. You threw it away. She stormed out, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. William moved more slowly. He stayed seated for a long moment, his head in his hands. Then he stood, but he didn't follow Margot. He walked past me and stopped. I looked up. He opened his mouth, closed it, then whispered, I'm sorry. It was the first apology he'd given me in 20 years. And then he walked out, alone. I watched him go, my chest tight with a tangle of emotions I couldn't untangle. Alexander helped me gather my things. We left through the main doors and stepped out onto the courthouse steps. The media descended like a wave. Microphones thrust forward, cameras flashed, voices shouted over one another. Ms. Monroe, how do you feel about winning? What will you do with the inheritance? Will you forgive your parents? Alexander started to pull me toward the car, but I stopped. He'd told me not to say anything, but I needed to. I turned to face the cameras. "This isn't about winning or losing," I said, my voice clear. "This is about honoring my grandmother's wishes." The crowd quieted. "She taught me that justice isn't revenge, it's truth. And truth doesn't need to shout." I took a breath. "She loved me when I had nothing to give back but love. That's what family means." I paused, looking directly into the cameras. I hope people remember this isn't about money, it's about showing up. I turned and walked to the car. Alexander followed. Inside, with the doors closed and the noise muffled, I finally let myself breathe. I sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, but I didn't start the engine. Victory, I'd won. But it felt strange, hollow almost, because the person I wanted to celebrate with wasn't here. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small photo, Grandma Rosalind smiling at the camera, her hand on my shoulder. "We did it, Grandma," I whispered. "We won." But even as I said it, I felt the ache. Winning without her here felt like losing something too. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello." A pause, then a voice quiet, trembling. "Natalie, please, can we talk? I need to tell you something. Something I should have said 20 years ago." It was William. I didn't hang up, but I didn't answer right away either. "Let me think about it," I said finally. I hung up. I stared at the phone for a long moment, then set it down. As I drove away from that courthouse, I realized something. I'd spent 20 years being the little girl they left behind, but I wasn't that little girl anymore. I was the woman my grandmother raised, strong, honest, unafraid. But one question remained. Could I ever forgive him? 3 months after the trial ended, I found myself in another courtroom this time to hear Margot's criminal sentencing. The assault charges had moved forward. The evidence was overwhelming the video witness statements, the police report. Margot's defense claimed emotional distress. The jury returned a guilty verdict in under 2 hours. The courtroom was smaller with fewer cameras. Margot sat at the defendant's table looking older and harder. No remorse showed in her eyes. The judge turned to me. "Ms. Monroe, would you like to provide a victim impact statement?" I stood and walked to the podium. When my mother slapped me that day, the physical pain wasn't what hurt most. It was realizing that even after 20 years, I still wasn't worth her respect. Margot's expression didn't change. I was 7 when they abandoned me. I'm 27 now. In those 20 years, she could have called, visited, tried, but she didn't. And when she finally came back, it wasn't to apologize. It was to take what my grandmother left me. When I said no, she hit me. I paused. I asked for acknowledgement that what she did was wrong, that money doesn't give you the right to hurt people. I sat down. The judge gave Margot a chance to speak. She stood. I lost my temper. It shouldn't have happened. No apology, no remorse. The judge's disappointment was visible. "Mrs. Monroe, your lack of remorse is deeply troubling. You assaulted your own daughter over money. This court sentences you to 6 months in county jail, 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory anger management therapy." He nodded to the bailiff. "Take her into custody." As Margot was led away in handcuffs, she looked back at me with pure hatred. A week later, I received a letter from the county jail. "Natalie, you took everything from us. The money, the reputation, the future. I hope you're happy. I hope the price of destroying your own family was worth it. You'll end up alone, just like the bitter old woman who raised you, M." I read it once and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just finality. I tore it in half and threw it away. "We were never family," I whispered. "Not really." 4 months after the trial, William called again. He'd been calling for months. This time I answered. "Can we meet?" he asked quietly. "Just to talk, please." I hesitated, then said yes. We met at a small coffee shop on a Saturday morning. William sat at a corner table, staring into his coffee. He looked different. Gray hair, thinner, worn, a cheap suit instead of designer clothes. But his eyes held something new, sincerity. I sat down. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I wasn't sure you would. I'm not sure why I did. I need you to hear this. Not because I deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve the truth." He looked down at his hands. I watched your grandmother's video. Every word was true. I chose my career. I told myself it was temporary, that we'd come back. But days turned into years, and every year made picking up the phone harder. The guilt grew. The shame grew. Instead of facing it, I ran. His voice cracked. Margot made running easy. She never wanted to go back. She said you'd be better off. I let myself believe it. He looked up, eyes red. But I saw you in that courtroom, strong, talented, everything Grandma said you were. And I realized I didn't just lose my mother. I lost my daughter. That was my choice. My failure. He paused. I lost my job after the trial. Margot divorced me while in jail, blamed everything on me. I'm living in a one-bedroom apartment now doing freelance work. I lost everything. He met my eyes. But I deserved to lose it. I should have lost it 20 years ago. He slid two things across the table. A photograph faded and creased. It showed a little girl, me, maybe 5, sitting on a man's shoulders, both laughing. I've kept this in my wallet for 22 years, he said quietly. I want you to have it. I picked it up, hands trembling. I don't remember this day. You were 5. We went to the park. You laughed all day. Tears blurred my vision. The second item was a check, $50,000. This is all I've saved. To pay back some of the legal fees. It'll take years to pay the rest, but I will. I stared at him. I don't know if I can forgive you. He nodded. I know, but I had to try. Why now? My voice hardened. Why not 5 years ago, 10... Fear, shame, cowardice. They're all true. He stood to leave. At the door, he stopped. Your grandmother raised you well. You're stronger than I ever was. Then he walked out. I sat alone holding the photograph. Tears fell, but they weren't sad. They were release. I walked to my car, the photo in my purse, feeling heavier than it should. I couldn't forgive him. Not yet, maybe not ever. But for the first time in 20 years, I saw him not just as the man who abandoned me, but as a man who made a terrible mistake and was finally facing it. Grandma would say that's where healing starts, not in forgiveness, but in truth. 18 months after Grandma died, I stood in front of a building with a new sign, the Rosalind Monroe Foundation for Children in Need. It was a beautiful September morning in Austin. The sky was impossibly blue. Over 200 people filled the courtyard, lawyers, former colleagues, foster families, and kids. The media was there too, but this wasn't about headlines. Grandma's portrait hung in the lobby, her at 60 in her judge's robes, smiling that wise, kind smile. I stood at the podium and took a deep breath. 18 months ago, I lost the most important person in my life. I began. My grandmother, Judge Rosalind Monroe, taught me that love isn't about biology. It's about showing up. My voice grew stronger. She showed up for me when I was 7 and had nowhere to go. She didn't just give me a home, she gave me a future. This foundation is how I show up for other kids. Kids who feel forgotten. Kids who wonder if they matter. I looked into the cameras. If you're one of those kids, you matter. You're not alone. This foundation will show up for you the way my grandmother showed up for me. Tears stung my eyes. Grandma, this is your legacy, not the money, this. The crowd applauded. I cut the ribbon. Inside, I met Lily Patterson, 16 years old, clutching her UT Austin acceptance letter. Ms. Monroe, she said quietly, thank you. Without this scholarship, I knelt to her eye level. Call me Natalie, you earned it. Your essay was excellent. I wrote about feeling invisible, she whispered. I know that feeling, I said gently, but you're not invisible, not to me. Her eyes filled with tears. Does it get better? I took her hand. Yes, it gets better, I promise. She hugged me tight. Later in the office, we'd designed to look like grandmas. I opened my journal. Dearest Grandma, we opened the foundation today. 500 kids helped. Lily reminds me of myself, scared but hopeful. I think of you every day. Margot's in prison. William calls sometimes. We've had coffee a few more times. I'm not ready to forgive, but I'm listening. I'm not that scared 7-year-old anymore. I'm the woman you believed in. I miss you. But I'm okay. Thank you for everything. Love always, Natalie. I closed the journal and touched the photo on the desk, our last one together, both of us laughing. My phone buzzed. A text from James the architect volunteering at the foundation. Dinner tonight, Emma wants to show you her science project. I smiled. Emma was 8. Maybe I could be for her what Grandma was for me. 7 p.m. I texted back. That evening, I sat in the mansion garden where Grandma's roses bloomed. The sunset painted the sky orange and pink. My phone rang. William. I saw the news about the foundation, he said quietly. Your grandmother would be so proud. I hope so. I am too, for whatever that's worth. I paused. It's worth something. Not forgiveness, but peace. I have to go. Dinner plans. Take care, Natalie. You too. I hung up and walked through the garden. I closed my eyes and felt the breeze. I'm doing it, Grandma, I whispered. I'm passing on what you gave me. The foundation is helping kids who feel like I did. I'm showing up for them. The wind picked up warm and strong. You taught me that family isn't blood, it's love. It's choosing to stay. Now I'm building my own family. James, Emma, the foundation staff. Even William, maybe, little by little. Tears slid down my cheeks. I miss you every day, but I'm okay. I'm happy. I opened my eyes. For just a moment, I felt her there. In the roses, in the wind, in everything. My phone buzzed. We're here. Emma can't wait to see you. I wiped my tears and smiled. I looked back at the house, Grandma's house, my house home, and then toward the headlights pulling in, past or future. I chose the future. I walked toward them, toward laughter dinner and a little girl who needed someone to show up. And as I did, I realized something Grandma had been trying to teach me all along. We don't inherit love, we pass it on. And that's exactly what I would do, for the rest of my life. Looking back at my story, I realized that family betrayal cuts deeper than any courtroom battle. When my parents abandoned me at 7, I learned the first painful lesson: blood doesn't make, family presence does. If you're facing family betrayal right now, don't let it define you. Don't become bitter like Margot, consumed by greed and rage. Choose differently. God teaches us that love is a choice, not an obligation. My grandmother chose to love me when my parents chose their careers. She showed me that family revenge isn't the answer. Truth and justice are. When they returned 20 years later for money, I could have sought family revenge, destroyed them publicly beyond the courtroom. But Grandma taught me better. Justice isn't revenge. It's truth. Here are the lessons I learned through 20 years of pain. First, don't wait for apologies that may never come. Heal anyway. God gives us strength to forgive not for them, but for ourselves. Second, document everything. Grandma's 20 letters, her video, will, her meticulous records, they saved me. Truth is your shield when family betrayal strikes. Third, when people show you who they are, believe them. Margot's hateful letter from prison proved she'd never change. William's sincere apology showed he finally faced his failure. Fourth, build your own family. James, Emma, Lily, the 500 kids we've helped. They're my family now because they choose to stay. Fifth, legacy isn't money. It's what you pass on. The Rosalind Monroe Foundation is Grandma's real inheritance, not the 280 million, but the love multiplied through service. God didn't promise us perfect families, but He promised us purpose through pain. My pain became 500 children's hope. If you're the abandoned child, the forgotten one, the one fighting family revenge fantasies in your heart, hear this. You matter. Your presence matters. And someone somewhere needs you to show up the way Grandma showed up for me. If this story touched your heart, please leave a thoughtful comment below sharing your reflections. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss stories that inspire, challenge, and heal. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. Your time and attention mean the world. Important note. The next story may contain fictionalized elements designed for educational and reflective purposes. If this type of content isn't for you, feel free to explore other videos that better suit your preferences. We respect your choice.